Hello and welcome to the Exam Study Expert podcast and to our fourth instalment in the Flashcard Mastery course. Flashcards are a super powerful learning tool and hugely popular with you all, but there's a lot of detail when it comes to getting the most out of your flashcard learning, and much more than a lot of people think. If you haven't listened to the prior episodes in this course, they are designed to be gone through in order so that we build up your theoretical knowledge and practical skill sets in a systematic way. A little like building a pyramid. We want to make sure those lower levels are rock solid, not missing any important gaps, so that the higher tiers of understanding are well supported. So please do go back and listen to parts 1, 2, and 3 if you haven't already. Part 4 is all about top tips to elevate the all-important training or flashcard testing part of the process. Now, I've got a little bit of a confession to get out of the way today. This was originally intended to be the fourth and final instalment of the course, and indeed I'd originally recorded a version as such. My problem was I'm a tinkerer. I tinker with stuff and iterate and improve, both before and sometimes even after I put things out into the world. And in this case, with part 4, I was trying to make sure that I was including as much helpful stuff as I know I could, as many ideas that I knew would be useful to you all as I could fit in, and I also wanted to be as clear as possible. And so I was adding a little bit of context and explanation. And so I found myself re-recording an updated version of part 4. And I was much happier with the content, except for one thing. It had just become a little bit too much for a single installment. And even I was feeling a little bit overwhelmed listening to myself as I was recording it. So my experience is that I can get away with those longer episodes when I'm with a guest and you have that mix of voices. But I know it's quite hard to listen to a single voice for too long, particularly if it's only in audio format. And you don't have kind of any visual materials to look at as well without kind of getting that mental overload. So ultimately, I found myself I was much happier splitting up this part 4. And we're going to do part 4A this week, part 4B next week. Taking a leaf out of the work of producers of many famous film franchises in recent decades, from Harry Potter to the Hunger Games, splitting that final installment into 2 separate parts. So next week, just to explain how this is going to break down. So next week in part 4B, we're going to do 6 specific tips and tricks to help you level up your flashcard testing. There are some really powerful ideas there to help you improve your knowledge retention and help you build out your understanding more quickly and more durably so that it sticks for longer. But first, today, I'm going to give you a little pep talk on why it's so important to prioritize the testing, because I know this is, one of the biggest challenges that many of you have. And, having talked to many of you through the course of my coaching work, I know this is an issue time and time again. And there's quite a lot of detail to get into in the conversation on this. So I'm really happy with this being a sort of standalone episode. I've identified some of the common reasons why people end up getting into the trap of basically spending too much time or, exclusively spending time making cards. And so we run out of time to actually test ourselves on them. Some really good ideas coming up today. I think you'll really enjoy listening to this installment. If you are a regular flashcard user, you'll probably recognize some of the tendencies I talk about. Please do remember that if you are a content creator or an educator yourself, it is fine, of course, to use ideas from the Flashcard Mastery course or other parts of our work here at Exam Study Expert, but please do make sure you are clearly crediting the Exam Study Expert podcast as your source. And we love it when you recommend us as a resource to your students or your readers or your viewers. Please do point them to the podcast and our YouTube channel to help them find more. So without further ado, let's dive into today's lesson on training with flashcards and that pep talk on why the training phase is so important to prioritize. Let's just rewind a little bit. So in part 1 of this course, we explored the science behind effective learning strategies, of which flashcards are one prominent example. There are others too. And the key theory boils down to the power of 2 things. The science of effective learning is really 2 big ideas. Retrieval practice being one idea, spaced repetition being the other. Retrieval practice and spaced repetition. Retrieval practice means testing yourself, trying to recall what you've learned, and spaced repetition means repeating at time intervals. So really the secret to effective learning is combining these two ideas together. So not just testing yourself once, but testing yourself repeatedly. Spaced retrieval practice. Flashcards are a really powerful tool for putting these principles into action. And which is why we've dedicated this whole course to that tool. And you'll remember that from part 2, perhaps, that there are essentially 2 main stages of flashcard study. First, we make our flashcards, we write them, we write those question-answer pairs, those cue and answer pairs. And then secondly, we test our cards, we train with them, looking at the cue and trying to remember the corresponding answer. Now, note that only one of these stages, and that second one, training by testing your flashcards, actually involves any retrieval practice. That first step, where we make our cards, is an important preparatory step, but that's more like putting a piece of gym equipment together rather than any actual workout. Making your cards is getting the pull-up bar out of its box, screwing it into your doorway. It's important, but we haven't actually done any pull-ups yet. No actual workout has happened yet. Flashcards are similar. Training with your flashcards is the actual memory workout, where we pull ourselves up on our bar and we start breaking a sweat. We've not actually done a memory workout until we start to test our flashcards. That's where we build memory and understanding. So if you're making your own cards, then it is important to make sure that our flashcard training keeps pace with our flashcard making. Many scholars find that they've amassed a big old pile of cards or a high count of cards in a digital flashcard app that have never even been tested once. So you end up sitting on 300 paper cards that you've made, but you've not tested them ever once, or you've got 672 cards in your Anki and you've never tested them all once. I think it's tempting to fall into this trap for a number of reasons, and I just wanted to talk through 3 of the big reasons and give you some of my thoughts on each of them. So I think one of the reasons this happens is the card making is a more concrete and very tangible measure of progress. You might feel like you're making lots of progress as you amass flashcards on many topics and you see that pile growing or that count ticking up in your Anki or whatever flashcard tool you're using. But that sense of progress is a little bit misplaced because, as we've said, we haven't actually done any memory workout yet. We've only prepared to do it. The real progress towards your goal of learning comes through the testing, not the making. The second thing I've noticed over the years is that it can often feel easier for people to kind of fit in the flashcard testing into the little gaps and odd bits of time throughout your day, whereas we feel that we can only do the flashcard making in our focused desk time. So if you have, say an hour in the evenings when you can sit at your desk, you might be tempted to prioritize using that time for flashcard making, the writing stage. And then at the week, and then during the day when you've kind of got that odd 5 minutes in a break at work or between classes, or you've got kind of 10 minutes while you're waiting for your train or the bus or whatever, you can just squeeze in testing a few cards in those little windows of time throughout the day. The problem with this is that we really need to remember that the testing is the most important part. So if anything, it's the testing that we should be prioritizing for our focused, concentrated hour of desk time in the evening rather than the making. So any extra testing we can squeeze in on breaks at school or work or at the bus stop is a bonus, but it shouldn't be relied on as our only testing time, especially if that bonus time is not keeping up with the number of new cards you're making. And then the final thing I've noticed is that some digital flashcard tools even disincentivize testing by the very way they design the user interface. Once you test a card for the first time, it then drops into the spaced learning algorithm. And from then on, the app will start pushing that card in front of you regularly. It won't start doing that when you make the card, only when you test it for the first time. So as soon as you test that card for the first time, you jump into that hamster wheel where it starts to bring it back time and time again under the spacing algorithm. And effectively, as soon as you test the card, you add to your future workload and build up more of that testing work that the app is going to recommend to you to do. So if you put off testing and focus only on making, you end up in this kind of, pleasant feeling space where you don't have to log in every day and see all these cards that the app is recommending you do. It's just nice and clear. There's no work for you to do. When you will log in, you can just go on and make some new cards, and it sort of feels a little lighter, a little easier. But this is unhelpful. This behavior nudge is nudging and incentivizing the exact opposite of the behavior we want. We want to engage with the testing, and so if the kind of interface has been designed that way in the Flashcard app that you're using, we need to be conscious of that and work against it. So one solution to this is simply ignoring the platform's nudges and doing your own thing when it comes to the spacing schedule. So basically ignore the cards that it tells you to test and do your own thing. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in part 4B in one of the 6 tips we do on flashcard testing, when we do a tip on you are allowed to ignore the algorithm, which goes into more depth about kind of basically ignoring what your flashcard app is telling you to do in terms of the spacing schedule. Now, some of you may be wondering why all of this matters. So if you're in the habit, for example, of making a bunch of flashcards, and exclusively and not doing the testing, you're sort of thinking, well, I'll do the testing a bit later. Why can't I spend like 6 weeks making all my cards and then I'll start testing them? There are a couple of reasons why that approach is not optimal. Firstly, there is the risk that you'll never actually get round to testing all of your cards. Let's look at an analogy. It's a bit like you've prepared a whole load of cake batter, but never put the cakes in the oven. You spent a lot of time mixing all the ingredients together, sifting the flour, etc., but you don't have any edible cake, any actual cooked edible cake to show for it. In the same way, when we're writing our cards, we're making relatively limited progress on our actual learning and understanding. So you spent a lot of time in your proverbial kitchen, in your metaphorical kitchen, with no actual or limited actual learning progress to show for it. Secondly, the other challenge with just that with that idea of let's just spend 6 weeks making all our cards and then I'll start testing them. The other problem is that that's a less efficient way to work, because if you test as you go along, we get a unique opportunity to start to consolidate our learning as we go, and it saves us a little bit of time in the long run. So let me just explain that. Whenever you make a new card, whenever you write that new card, a window of opportunity opens up, maybe a first day or two after you've written that card, during which you'll find it considerably easier to recall the answers successfully compared to if we come back to that same card in a couple of months' time. If we leave it too long for that first round of testing, our success rate plummets as our memory for that topic fades. And it's not the worst thing in the world. It just basically means you need to start from a lower point in terms of refamiliarizing yourself with all that material. And it kind of takes you a bit longer to go through that testing time. Whereas if we kind of consolidate as we go, we lock in a bit more of that learning. It's not going to be perfect. There'll still be bits that you can't remember if you come to back to those flashcard decks in weeks or months to come. But we kind of lock in a lot more of that learning, a lot less of it sort of seeps out through the holes if we're doing that testing as we go along. To use our cake making analogy once again, it's a little bit like that. If we're mixing up a whole load of cake batter, we have a limited time opportunity window to get that cake batter in the oven and bake that cake before the batter goes rancid. So we need to write our card and then get it in the oven, so to speak, bake it. In other words, test it, consolidate that knowledge, before our memory of that card fades away. So I always suggest aiming to complete that first round of retrieval practice within that window of opportunity, that first 1-2 days, ideally after you've written the card. We should be testing it for the first time, and thereby locking in those learnings and saving ourselves time in the long run. That's kind of what we're aiming for. How do we actually do it? Well, a great way to actually implement all this is just having a really simple little rule for yourself that you're not allowed to progress to making any new cards until you are up to date on testing the cards you've already made by that point in your studies. So if you are sitting on a huge pile of cards, my advice would be to you to take a little break from making cards and catch up to date, and just spend the next few days, few weeks, whatever it's going to take, catching up on all the testing and get the deck clear. And then once we're up to date, we fall into a pattern whereby each day when we sit down to study, we're not allowed to write any new cards until we've caught up and tested the cards we wrote yesterday or the day before, whenever the last time we were studying was. So to take an illustrative example, let's say you're studying for about an hour each day. A typical day's study might involve starting with 10, 20 minutes, testing the cards that you wrote in yesterday's study hour, before moving on to use the remainder of the hour to write some new cards, which you will then test tomorrow. This effectively takes care of our first round of spaced repetition. Beyond that, when you're considering your second, third round of spaced repetition, there are a variety of approaches we can take to your spaced repetition schedule, and that is one of the key decisions I help my coaching clients to make. So if you would like to talk through your learning approach with me directly and make sure that it's optimized for your needs, please do consider reaching out today. It will be my joy to help you, as I've helped many hundreds of other students and professionals working for exams in my years as an exam success coach. So just head to examstudyexperts.com/coaching to learn more and get the ball rolling. If you've been through this course so far, you've had a very good taste of what it means to really get into the weeds and optimize your learning strategy. Even if you're kind of familiar with the basics of a technique like flashcards, there's often so much we can do to help you optimize, fine-tune, and refine what you're doing to help you make even more progress in the available time. And I'd warmly invite any listener who's preparing for an exam to get in touch so we can apply all the key ideas from this course and from the podcast more generally to your circumstances specifically, because everyone's a little bit different. And I really want to make sure you're getting the best results from your learning in your specific situation. As well as the kind of practical side of things, having me by your side is just often such a big weight off your shoulders. Many of my clients over the years have described how, when they first kind of enrolled in coaching with me, it's just huge moments of relief. You don't have to forge a path alone or cobble together generic advice from the internet, even from excellent sources like this very podcast. You can now work with a trusted expert who's going to see you right. Get in touch today at examstudyexpert.com/coaching. And that will do it for today, folks. So the big lesson from today, keep pace with your flashcard testing as you make your new cards. And again, I recommend that rule whereby you don't allow yourself to make any new cards on a given day of study until you've caught up to date and tested cards you've already made. Wishing you every success in your studies and particularly in your flashcard making and testing. And I will look forward to seeing you next week for part 4B, the final installment of the Flashcard Mastery course, when we'll be talking about 6 top tips for actually doing your flashcard testing to retain more faster. I look forward to seeing you then. Thanks ever so much and wishing you every success.